Hello, viewers of Next Big Future. I'm Brian Wang. I'd like to explain some massive transformations that have already happened in the world of EVs and batteries. So, it's not projections based upon just some chart analysis or something like that. That things have already happened in 2021, which will take 4 or 5 years to play out. But investments have been made, the production growth and demand growth have already started. That will mean 50 million cars, EV cars, by 2025. This is massively transformational, and it's more than 20 million cars, 50 million cars. What difference does it make? I'll explain how this will be a completely different world because of this change, which changes have already occurred, investments that already happened. So the EV world changed in late 2021. And this paradigm shift has been mostly ignored, not fully understood by almost everyone. So the global EV demand explosion that started in 2021, which people see from the increasing back orders and other growth, but again, not fully appreciated. And there's an iron LFP supply explosion that started later in 2021. So the demand growth started earlier. The actual production of LFP batteries really started increasing in 2021. I'm going to go over this all in detail. And there's a Tesla capacity explosion that is somewhat started, but is really going to gather steam in 2022 and will carry on beyond. So everything clearly started in 2021, but the shocks will happen from 2022, 2025, maybe 2026. The Lord of the Ring quote is from Galadriel at the beginning: "The world has changed. I see it in the water, I see it in the earth, I smell it in the air." It has completely changed, and this will be, fundamental shift to the world. We can start going over that. So the big thing is batteries went from scarce to abundant. Not everyone can take advantage of this. Other car makers have to have particular suppliers, have to have nickel batteries. Tesla made the pivot to iron batteries, which basically occurred from 2020 to 2021. They started in 2020, really started going in 2021 to iron LFP batteries. And this needs to have their superior drivetrain efficiency in order to get acceptable mile range of 250 to 300, and then they'll continue to have this 20% mileage weight range advantage to take advantage of these iron LFP batteries. So in Q4 really started for Tesla, where they started getting a lot more batteries from CATL, a supplier that they've had since 2020 with lower amounts, but the growth in batteries really started in 2021. And what does this mean? They had 15% growth every quarter in Q2 and Q3 for production growth, but that shifted to 28% quarterly growth in Q4 of 2021. And the bulk of that growth happened in December, where they grew like 18% in 1 month. So Tesla quarterly growth is like Amazon, a fast-growing company still. Amazon yearly growth, 21%, 20% in 2019 and 2021, 37% in 2020. So 28% quarterly growth is comparable to a pretty fast-growing year for Amazon. So the 2022-2025 demand growth surprises. 15 European countries and China and California all have hit the 10% EV adoption rate. That means out of all cars sold, 9% are gasoline, ICE combustion engine cars, and then 10% or more are now EV cars. And this is going to be 20% in 2022. How fast do we shift from 10% to 75%? Norway has already made that shift. They've went from 10% EVs to 75%, and that took 6 years. Switzerland is also well advanced in that process. I think got to 50% EV levels, and other countries that are significant countries that are at high levels too. Again, we'll go over that in a bit more detail. So what does this mean? That means, say, 45 million global EVs in 2021, 10 million in 2022, 18 in 2023, 25, 30 million in 2024, 40 to 60 million in 2025. So you just have this faster growth. And that means no time for anyone who's slow to catch up, because the explosion in demand is going to happen. Either you have the factories, and Tesla just is turning on 2 new factories, Austin, Berlin, big ones, which they can expand because they have the land area to do it. They're expanding in China, even though they didn't have the land, and they bought a new place, and they're going to double up capacity to 2 million. No other car maker had the factories to expand to 10 million cars by 2025. None of them. None of the China ones, none of them can get up to 10 million cars, 10 million EV cars in 2025. So that means Tesla will be the dominant one. With this explosion, this earlier pull forward, surprising pull forward of EV growth, Tesla will be the main beneficiary, because if you don't have the factories, you can't make the cars. It doesn't matter. So the debates about, oh, I love this car, I love that car, utterly irrelevant, utterly irrelevant. If everyone wants an EV car, who can make EV cars? Who has the factories to make EV cars? And of course, who can profitably do it, etc. So all of those tick, 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 Tesla. So we can go to the S-curve of technology adoption. So you can have relatively slow growth, 0 to 10%. And then once you've passed 10%, then you're in stage 2 of fast growth. And then things slow up in stage 3. So that 10 to 70% level, which is in here, some time around the time out to 25, took 6 years for Norway, right? 6 years to go from 10% to that. So each country, look at, so China's already at the 20% level. So a year into that, Germany the 30%, farther along in this fast growth phase. California the 10%, and then other countries, other states are going to hit that 10% and then boom into fast growth. Okay, so that EV demand explosion is really happening 2022 to 2026, and a lot of it's happening by 2025. So we've already seen evidence of abundant Tesla demand. They almost doubled their production level from the 500,000 in 2020 up to 937,000, 87% growth in 2021, and still they have 400,000 back orders globally. You can go to the Tesla.com site. How long did it take me to get a Model Y or Model 3? 6 months, blah, blah, blah. You do the calculations, 400,000 cars. Okay, so from 500,000, they went to 930,000 cars plus 400,000 back orders, 1.4, basically tripling of demand. If they could have tripled their cars, they would have sold every one. Okay, and the back orders mainly happened in 2021. They didn't have a ton of back orders in 2020, 2019, and they raised prices by $7,000. Okay, they had to raise prices so they didn't even have even more back orders. Okay, so you can think of the demand. Look at the people old enough, the people lined up to see Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back back in the late 70s. Okay, it's not like, oh, scratch my head, is there demand? People lined up for it, and they're lined up here with $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 checks to say, I want that Tesla. So there's over $20 billion in excess demand. If they build cars as rapidly, I think it will at least take them 6 months to work out that demand. And I think the demand still grows. All they have to do is like, okay, I'm going to stop raising prices on you guys. And the whole raising prices thing, they've still got more affordable relative to all the other cars, because the average US selling price of cars went from 38,000 up to 48,000. So every car got more expensive. Used cars got more expensive. So the starting price of a Model 3 is still lower than the average US selling price of cars. Okay, so still more affordable. So they don't look at the overall thing of like how expensive other cars got relative to Tesla's price increases. Tesla increased prices less than other regular car makers. Okay, so and then do you want to track how much Tesla demand is? You can just look at it. like how many months does it take me to get that car? Change the thing by region at Tesla.com, try and order a car. Okay, so the demand explosion has happened and is ongoing. So the 2022 to 2025 China EV demand surprises. So I said already at 20 to 23%. December 23%. January they slow up and begin in the year. Plus they dropped off an $800 subsidy. So still 20%. Local car makers at 30 to 35% EVs. Okay, local car makers make some, your BYDs. They make some plug-in hybrids and some ICE cars, but they're farther along in the shift. Only the joint ventures with your Volkswagen and your Toyota and stuff like that are they having more of the old ICE cars because the legacy guys are moving slower. So that following that demand curve, where things really shoot up from 10 to 70%, 30% EVs by the end of the year. So that means you go from, you maybe have 5 to 7 million EVs in demand for China in 2022, at least 4 million, and then 40 or 50% EV demand in 2023, which is 10 to 13 million, because China makes 26 million cars, right? 50 to 60%, 2024, again, 13, 16, 78%. So 20 million cars EV demand just from China. Of course, China is by 2025, but China has a chunk of it, 25 to 40%, that are really cheap, crappy cars, right? That they're poor people willing to accept. And Tesla's not going to compete for that market. Okay. So there is some cheap cars, but then globally, there's not a huge demand for cheap cars. Maybe we produce a category of cheap and acceptable EVs that people in India and Thailand, but that'll be a new market. The regular 80 million, 100 million cars we make, predominantly the rich world, people are not buying cheap cars, right? You could have bought it, some cheap Kia and other stuff like that. Those things are not sold in really high volumes. There is a market for it, not the main heart of the current car market. And again, no other car maker expand to 10 million cars per year by 2025. Maybe one or two have a chance. Again, I will go through another video, the details model by model, what would go on and what's difficult to go from almost nothing now, 100,000, 200,000, whatever cars, 1/5, 1/10 the level of Tesla, and then somehow come up with super high demand models, adding up a bunch of stuff to get to, 2 million, 4 million cars. It just be very difficult. Maybe one or two Chinese car makers can do it. The legacy autos don't seem to have a chance to do it. Again, it'll take longer to go over why that's the case, but it is the case. Very slow growth with Volkswagen, despite all of their efforts they're putting into it. I can go through that in more detail, a bit of longer discussion, not relevant to the main point here of massive demand explosion, massive supply explosion, utter transformation in 4 years. So 2021 batteries and 2025 targets. So CATL, almost 100 gigawatt hours of batteries made, predominantly iron LFP, okay? 2.5 times as much as they had last year, okay? Their target is 1,200 gigawatt hours in 2025, them alone. Some, various analysts, have poo-pooed but they're starting up the factories. All the major Chinese guys, CATL, BYD, CALB, Goshen, S-Volt, the guys who are number 1, number 4, number 7, number 8, and number 10 globally, all have massive targets. 500 gigawatt hours for CALB for 2025, 300 gigawatts for Goshen 2025, 600 gigawatt hours for S-Volt Energy 2025. Okay, so that's the capacity target. And S-Volt has a more detailed analysis. They think they'll get to 450. About 75% of that will actually be produced in 2025. Still, you add all this up, and you're at like 3 terawatt hours from the Chinese manufacturers, plus another 800 gigawatt hours from European guys. Again, these capacity targets funded and factory started in 78% of the cases. Okay, so if I fund a $2 billion factory, I got to have signed orders and things, right? The banks, even in China, just don't say, here, go and do it. You had to have the orders, right? So they have orders for these things for like 80-90% of this demand that they're building out. And it takes $40 to $50 million per gigawatt hour. $40 to $50 million per gigawatt hour of factory capacity currently, and then the prices are dropping to make that factory. So if I'm making a terawatt hour, 1,000 gigawatt hours, I need $40 to $50 billion to do that. Okay, as a battery maker. Predominantly, it's coming from state, city, and other bank funding for these Chinese battery makers. The demand is so high that the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Information is telling them, hey, innovate a little bit. Don't just make a ton of iron LFP batteries. You create a glut, it'll be a problem. Okay, so they're trying to warn them about that, but they have the battery makers are listening because they got the orders. They want to make the money. Okay, so loads and loads of iron LFP batteries. CATL 2021 ramp, again, past tense, already happened. Okay, so they had relatively flat levels first half of the year, and then boom, started going up, so that they were like from 7 gigawatt hours per month in July, they more than double to 18 gigawatt hours in December globally, 14 gigawatts in December. Okay, so this is them completing some of those factories. So the run rate, so because things change fast, you got to look at monthly run rates. So the monthly run rate for them is 18 times 12 is 200 some gigawatts of annualized run rate for the December number, which was their 230 gigawatt hour capacity target. Okay, so they got to got to about like 40% of that capacity target. They hit the capacity level, 230 at the end of the year, but their actual production ramp ended up with, just short of 100 gigawatt hours. Okay, and Tesla gets 20% of their batteries. Okay, that's why there was a big jump in how much batteries, iron LFP batteries that Tesla got. And this is like to increase, but that 4 gigawatt hours of batteries is enough for another 70,000 cars per month. For Tesla, doubles what Tesla did in December 2021. So, and they added only 18,000 cars per month. Tesla added 18,000 cars per month in December. And Tesla on the earnings call said, there's more capacity. If we had more chips and other things, we could have made more cars from Fremont and Shanghai. Okay, so they've said the capacity is there. Also, there's video evidence that they increased their production rate of taking 8 hours to make a car, but then coming off the end of the line at the beginning of 2021 every 2 minutes. Pretty good numbers for Model Y. Everyone was impressed. Every 2 minutes coming out, and then at the end of the year, every 33 seconds. So they were almost 4 times faster in producing cars off the line, off the Model Y line in China. Okay, and Elon has talked multiple times, 2016, 2018, 2020, about how speeding up the factory is a huge thing. That there's physically you can go to 10 to 100 times, by getting it up to walking speed to get the cars off the line. So Tesla's continuing to work on that. And worst case, they make more factories. Worst case, they can make another sprung or tent factory like they did for the Model 3 ramp, which made all those cars. They did that in 3 weeks. Okay, so if they have the land and they have the demand, they can make more sprung structures where they're allowed to do it, which would be places in the US, places in China. Totally let them do that kind of rapid factory construction. But I think they'll need to do it. I think they can just speed up the internal production rates inside each of the factories. So just to reemphasize, CATL ramp already happened. It started happening, doubling in more than double in 5 months. And basically just factories that are already, ground broke just start being produced. iron LFP battery growth in general. So all of China, 2021, the LFP growth was 300% growth. So they go from 20 gigawatt hours up to 80 gigawatt hours from 2020 to 2021. Nickel batteries, not quite as good. They went from like 35 gigawatt hours up to 74 gigawatt hours. 100% growth, but less than the iron LFP. So the iron LFP stuff is going way, way, way faster. Again, transformation from the old world to the new world. So 296, let's just call it 300 gigawatt hours of world EV battery in 2021, 358 gigawatt hours for China alone. So probably 600 gigawatt hours, again, the doubling in 2022. China's CATL, SVolt, CALB, BYD, Goshen, had these huge targets for 2025. Even if you assign some for storage and don't quite make it, add in the rest of the world, 40 to 60 million cars with 50 kilowatt hour packs, and then a ton of storage, stationary energy storage. And then the growth, which again, none of the other analysts are expecting. And it's not like I'm doing just some kind of spreadsheet thing. Tens of billions of dollars, $100 billion is being spent by the Chinese makers in order to make this happen. They've put the money, they've started the factories, started the factory construction. It has started happening, is happening, will happen because they're spending the money to do it. It could end up being like the solar, where China wanted to dominate solar, get 67% of the solar panels. And then they periodically got into glut situations despite high growth in solar panels, right? A glut in LFP batteries, again, is good for Tesla, right? The price drops as they have a glut and they have to like revamp the stuff. So the solar panel thing is comparable to what's going to happen with the iron LFP batteries. The 4680s still matter for Tesla. Geopolitical, risk reduction, diversification, all that kind of stuff, but also they're better batteries for the bigger vehicles, the performance vehicles, semis, buses, trucks, vans, premium models. The 4680 would be better, okay? And with the innovation they have in the factory, maybe they ramp faster than the other traditional form factors for nickel batteries. People talk about, you need more models. Old car companies have more models. The Model T got to 96% of the inexpensive car market during its period of dominance. By the end of World War I, Ford Model T drove nearly half of cars on Earth, one model. US average car now $47,000. Like I said, the average car prices are now high. Tesla's starting off at, get to $10,000 less than the average price and would have 78% of the market. So they could take their 30% margin increase, which is increased to 40%, shave off that 10%, accept only 30% margin, and then easily produce Model 3s and Model Ys for $35,000. Easy. And also as they ramp up, all these cost things go down for them, right? Because they'll get better and better at these iron LFPs, which are already starting at 60 to 80 bucks per kilowatt hour, cheaper than the nickel. And those things are going down to 50, 30 bucks or less, which again shaves off the price, the cost of the car. Gary Black had very good analysis, which goes from the total global EV market share and saying how much market share Tesla has of it. He keeps it at 20%. So he considered Tesla bull, says 25 million cars, EV cars in 2025. So I'm saying we're going to practically double that, if not more. That is a huge thing because that's basically taking his 2030 estimate for global volumes into 2025. Instead of 2025, we're at 51 or something. And then Tesla, instead of at 5 million, at 10, 11 million. And again, because it happens faster, I say Tesla gets more of it because no one else has the time to ramp. I want to have the 2030 to ramp. When latter half of the decade, GM said, I'm going to make another 200 gigawatt hours of battery factory with LG Chem or SK or whatever, the Korean companies. It all happened earlier. So if you can't make it earlier, if you haven't already made it earlier, then you got no chance to ramp. And then that also means more share price and other things. So the 2022 earnings surprise, we already had Q4 where they made 308,000 cars instead of 267 to 208,000. Everyone was expecting 267 to 280, ended up blowing it away by 15%, which is what that surprise CATL battery stuff did. Okay, and Tesla laying the stage for that by having, converting factories and systems to accept iron LFP battery instead of nickel, and having the efficiency of drivetrain to be able to get 250-mile, 300-mile range out of iron LFP batteries, which are heavier, less dense, etc. Tesla's continue to ramp China. The latest news was that they're going to get to 22,000 cars per week, which is 95,000 cars per month, which is 1.15 million cars per year in a few months. This is before the doubling of production, the separate factory expansion. And Tesla's been sandbagging a ton the last year or two, where basically they said, 50% growth, and then get to 87. If they hadn't, canceled the Model X, old Model X earlier, they could add another 30,000 cars. They would have had 960. They clearly were targeting 1 million cars for 2021. And then because of the supply chain of stuff, they kind of fell a little short. But it's they're sandbagging it. It's in the statements, they're saying Tesla China has 450,000 or more capacity, but the run rate's at 820,000 now. So super sandbagging the numbers, which is why people are surprised, because the analysts need to say, tell me exactly what it is. When you say it's so much lower than it actually is, because we want to guarantee surprises, then the analysts can't handle it until the numbers actually come out. So I'm saying this will mean 1.9 to 2.6 million cars for Tesla in 2022, instead of 1.3 to 1.5. So at least 50% more, maybe double. And again, can't know for sure, but again, the evidence seems to be accruing to that, which will also mean the margin will growth be better. The more cars you make, if I make 1.5 million cars off the same factory, whatever base, or make 2.5 million cars, the extra million cars is off of the same capital base. The backwards proven management just keep tracking that to soothe your demand concerns. And then the no drop in Q1. Normally, cars globally would have a drop in Q1, but because of the back orders, Tesla will not have any kind of drop, with any kind of like fluctuation demand. So the back orders prevent any kind of like demand seasonality fluctuation, anything. And then the 46As are coming online sometime in 2022. We'll see how much to make. We'll talk about that more later. And then, of course, Tesla beyond regular EVs. There's all kinds of stuff happening with robotaxi, which could be a 2 to 4x for the shares. The energy utilities, as they get a load of batteries, they can ramp that faster. Just need to get the chips. I'll have a separate video discussing the details about the chips, which I'm analyzing in detail. Tesla bought also kind of things, but this is secondary stories of Tesla going way beyond. Just from production, Tesla's going to be killing it, which I've explained in more detail. So we'll discuss these other things in separate videos. This is all just about the near term, already happened, LFP explosion, what that means for the next 4 years. The actual stuff before I go off that is that the robotaxi stuff could very well, and I do expect it to start happening this year in significant ways, in parallel with this other stuff. And the energy stuff will also be happening in parallel. And then Tesla bought a little bit later. But those other two things will get significant growth and will have meaningful impacts to Tesla and its share price growth story. So 2022, 2025 supply surprise. I already talked about CATL, SVolt, CALB, Goshen, others in China. Some of the numbers in Europe, the IPCEI talked about 822 gigawatt hour capacity. There's a bit of double counting. Some of the Chinese makers are making factories outside of China. And then the US, 600 to 1,000 gigawatt hours, maybe more. It depends how good the 4680s go for Tesla. If demand is there, Tesla has already a massive stack of cash, $17 billion, enough to make a terawatt hour of batteries. If they were to put that to it, and they're adding $1 billion, $2 billion, we'll start adding a lot more cash every quarter for them to start growing faster and faster. Product production domination. So again, global demand, say, going to 40 to 60 million by 2025, shifting the world completely over new cars over to EVs, and then continuing after that to shift the fleet of 1.5 to 2 billion global cars, convert those to electric cars. The initial thing will be just converting the rides. People will be riding in EV robotaxis sooner than they replace all those other cars. And the buyer supply transformation, like I said, LFP and then 4680s in a fast transition. Tesla superior costs and the factories and supply chain are things that sort this out. So if people go back to World War II and talk about the tanks, so the Sherman tank versus the Panzer was better, blah, blah, blah. But the US made 5-10 times more Shermans. So irrelevant, whatever that expensive German model back then. Okay, so it's, although Tesla's not only making more cars, I think they're making better cars. But in terms of the overall economics of it is how many cars can I make? Just like back then it was how many tanks can I make? The massive, 40,000, 100,000 tank production of the US and Soviet Union versus, 20 times fewer vehicles from the Germans. So for economics, Ray talked about this acceleration of cars coming out of the Model Y China factory. We have to look at the monthly data and annualize the run rates. Things are changing so fast that if you look at it year by year, 1 million to 2 million, you're missing the real growth run rate. It'd be like I'm saying, I'm going to ignore Amazon for 4 years, the 30% growth, and then come back to it and update, 2 or 3 times a decade. You're going to miss the details of what's happening. You just won't understand it. And then the domination, the statements from Volkswagen, Stellantis CEOs, they're telling everyone, hey, it takes us, Volkswagen says, it takes us 3 times longer, 30 hours of labor to make an ID4 versus 10 hours for Tesla. And then Tesla's going further down more rapidly in terms of making those things faster. Stellantis CEO saying it takes us 40 to 50% more cost to make an EV versus an ICE vehicle, while Tesla already has, reached parity on the cost because they took 12 years earlier to get going on it. So Tesla's superior drivetrains, they have digital twins, vehicles. So then Tesla can make 20 changes a week, 1,000 changes a year on the factory lines because they have automated testing with every vehicle, and they know what every vehicle has. So they can say, okay, this Model Y has these wiring and this whatever stuff, and then the next one down the line, they can say, okay, I can switch it out, right? So that 100% testing enables them to have massively fast changes versus minor changes year by year for legacy auto, and then 4 years for a model change where we changed the wheels and up the horsepower by 5% on versus the last Corollas or something like that, right? The changes that they're making are minor and tiny and take really 4 years to happen. Tesla's changing super fast, 20 changes, significant changes every week, 1,000 changes a year. And then Toyota has a 7-year plan to adopt agile manufacturing. Their plan is to get the next generation Toyota family leader, some 40, whatever, 30-year-old guy, to go into a sub company that will use agile manufacturing, develop that experience, and then take it back to Toyota in 7 years. That's the kind of glacial change that we're talking about at the legacy autos, okay? So cars in the factories look the same, but they are not. So that's what people confuse. They say, oh, Tesla looks like these other cars. The factory kind of looks like the other factory, but changes 1,000 times a year versus once every 4 years, not the same. Okay? And the cars look the same, not the same. It's like, all the electronics and everything are different, right? The teardowns that the Sandy Moreau does show the complete difference that Tesla makes. And they transform year to year. Oh, the Model Y looks like the Model Y, or the Model S looks like the old Model S, similar, but just know it's got acceleration in 2 seconds to 0 to 60, sub 2 seconds instead of 4 seconds. But what's happening, the actual engine, the only thing the same is the crankshaft. They got new physics and engineering in the electric engine, the most important part of the car, completely different. So that Model S engine will go into Cybertrucks. So they'll have 25% more power by weight from that if they don't improve it even more, right? So massive, fast changes, massive, fast changing company, is, comparing some kind of like industrial age transformation thing to, the Model T factory stuff. It's like the transformation is just completely different, even though on the surface they look similar. And also, Tesla's massive agility means in shortages of chips or an abundance of batteries, they can pivot instantly and adapt to it. And they also have the foresight in their factories. They're planning it out more, going all the way to the mining to make sure that supply chains are good. And that meant that they could, weather any price increases, any shortages better. So shortages or abundance, whatever's happening in this rapidly changing thing, they adapt best. So new chips, new supply chains, they were able to take onboard new chip manufacturers in 2 weeks. They had programmers write new firmware in order to take on those new chips. Ford had one chip supplier, Renesar, in Japan. They had a fire. It cost them half the production. And then Ford went down. They couldn't shift to any other supplier, right? So, and then same thing happens for the Mach-E for the batteries just recently, last few months, where CATL was supplying them nickel batteries because they wouldn't. Sorry, BYD was supplying them nickel batteries because they wouldn't take the BYD iron LFP batteries. A COVID shutdown occurred for BYD, and then Ford couldn't make the main Mach-E's as they wanted. Of course, they only made 400, but it's like they couldn't make a couple thousand, something like that. So just pathetic volumes, single sourcing, can't adapt and say, okay, I can take batteries from CATL, I can take batteries from maybe Goshen later, I can take batteries from CALB, I can take batteries from Panasonic and LG Chem, and I can make my own batteries. So I can do 5 different sources, entirely different supply chain things, some nickel, some iron LFP. So when sodium batteries come up, so who adopts it? CATL is working on those. Tesla will be adopted. Gallium arsenide chips come up and will make all the subsystems better for a vehicle. Who adopts that? Clearly, Tesla's the one that adopts it. Lithium air batteries come along, 5 times better. Who adopts it? Again, Tesla. So 2022 earnings surprises. Already had the Q4 surprise. CATL batteries, and then the massive production levels out of China. That's where things can be happening faster regulation. I think build out the expansion in China going to 285,000 per quarter, perhaps in Q2, up from less than 200,000 in Q4. I think it was like 170,000 cars in Q4 from China going to 285,000. And then they have this other expansion adding another 1 million cars, which should be fully producing by 2023. And they can also announce more factory expansions. They have the money, and if demand is there, they'll do it. So it's when they announce the volumes, 2 days after the close of a quarter, April 2nd, July 2nd, October 2nd, January 2nd, that's when the weak evidence becomes strong evidence, and then all the analysts will get shocked. Just like they're shocked in Q2 last year, Q3 last year, and Q4 of last year. Each time they were like, oh, well, didn't think Tesla could do that. I'm surprised. And surprises get bigger and bigger. So every time the analysts won't believe it, people won't believe it, and then Tesla will deliver. At some point, that'll change. And that'll be a step change re-rating when people start realizing, oh yeah, this is actually happening. This is happening. Then they'll start happening, and the quarter, the months where that happen will be a big re-rating. I don't know when that happens. So those volume numbers will be surprising. Somewhat less surprising will be the profit and revenue margin growth from the increased sales. So that continues to do so. So then 3 weeks later, when they have their earnings call after each of these volume announcements, then there'll be, surprises for some. The people who can't model out what the actual production growth would mean, would then be surprised by having more earnings than they expected from the production number. So in 2021, that ramp, like I said, 28% in Q4. See that little green thing, then the bright green, 19% in December. So they don't give them the monthly numbers from Fremont to get back into it. Before, it was relatively flat at about 100, 110,000 vehicles. But because there was growth in Q4, then you have to do some kind of ramp. It wasn't even. I presume it was something similar in Fremont to the China thing. It was basically more iron LFP batteries in China, and since some iron LFP battery use in certain models in Fremont, more nickel batteries get freed up for the other models, which are predominantly the nickel car, Tesla cars coming from Fremont, the Model S, the Model X, Performance, Model Y, etc. And again, not all of those CATL batteries, this first battery batch, are fully utilized from that 18,000 car increase in December, because that CATL factory plant really started producing in November. So Tesla can get to add another 50,000 cars per month by using that amount, and then more batteries are coming from CATL. December 2021, that shock which went over, the massive increase in December, and there's more production that Tesla will use from just those batteries, which just mainly matters for trying to game out Q1 and Q2 for Tesla. But the longer term growth story is clear because of the $100 billion that are being spent by the Chinese battery makers, and then Tesla being able to take advantage of it. So it's a long-term thing. I think it's going to happen in the details too, as it really revs up through 2022 and then into the later years. So how fast can Tesla absorb 4 gigawatt hours or more per month of batteries to add nearly 70,000 cars? If it takes all year, then Tesla gets to 2 million cars roughly. And then if it happens faster, like I think it happened faster, then you get to 2.3, 2.5 million cars. And possibly more, because it's how fast can they add even more stuff? I think it's very doable for them to do 2.5 million cars. With the video evidence of how fast they produce cars, can they speed it up more? Adding new capacity in China, adding stuff in Fremont, ramping up Berlin and Austin. How fast can the actual execution happen? If there's no constraint on batteries, and can they, are they willing to pay a bit more, and can suppliers supply them a bit more on chips and other components if the value's there? If they make $15,000, $20,000 per car, if they have to pay another $500,000 to speed up and get even more chips, seems like that's a no-brainer to say yes to do that. And then a perfect ramp maybe gets 2.6 million, perhaps even more. If everything ramps perfectly, Germany, Austin, and I think there could be some surprises later half the year from Germany and Austin, and then even more stuff next year from cars with 4680s. Elon also talked about manganese batteries, that those have the potential to scale to many terawatt hours. So a lot more battery innovation is happening. more detailed analysis would be needed on that. And then they can get higher ranges from the LFPs by increasing the silicon in the anodes, limiting factor. Jordan Giesecke, explains that in great detail. The other impact down the road is that Tesla making more and more cars over double the nearest competitor, right now triple in terms of EVs, means they get farther and farther along the growth curve. LFP is already on a lower cost decline curve from lower volume. Then they get to higher volumes in nickel, and they drive the cost down even faster. The sooner they get to $50 or $40, $30 per kilowatt hour, maybe they even get to $10 per kilowatt hour in 2027. Based on these kind of like declining cost curves. $40 per kilowatt hour, I think, in 2024 for LFP. And then the Model 3 decline curve, as they make more and more vehicles, Tesla make more and more vehicles, then they can shave out costs, which is translates into them, constantly innovating, make 1,000 changes every year. To that is what it takes. So they'll have 4 to 5 more doublings ahead of legacy automakers at 1 million cars. If they get to 20 million, 30 million, 50 million cars, then they'll be 3 to 5 doublings ahead in terms of increasing their mastery of EV car making. That's advantages, all the back orders. Other car makers are getting down 7 million cars total. They want to make 87 million cars, they only can make 80 because of chips and supply chains. And again, it's still happening in 2022, where they're constrained by chips. Toyota factory shutting down, Ford factory, GM, etc. Volkswagen, more shutdowns. They get impacted by the Russian shutdowns. Batteries, they're way more expensive. Tesla gets more range for the same kilowatt hour. Balance sheet, Tesla has no debt, almost no debt, 17 billion in cash. GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, and GM, all 100 billion, 200 billion debt, all on leasing. So if those leases don't renew because the demand for used cars go down, massive hit to legacy auto. And also the parts. They don't really make money on new car sales. They make it on the parts and on the leasing and the financing. Gigacasting coming to Tesla. New factories, 30% of factories, fewer parts, 10% less car weight. Again, faster, more efficient, cheaper. The 4680 batteries. Utility batteries, just 5% demand now, but grow really fast. I'll have a separate video discussing the utility scale batteries. FSD, 10% buy at $8,000 to $10,000, 1% in China. This could become really big as they actually get to the point where everyone can use a more advanced version of the beta, which I expect to happen this year, because they're already at 60,000 beta testers. So going to 240,000, will happen this year. And then full autonomy, competitors less data, mostly geofenced. So more factors, more cars. Volkswagen has a $4,000 loss per car. Volkswagen and GM, those guys, they're trying to get to break even on their EVs by 2025. And if the vast majority of cars become EV, then they can't make money on any of these EVs until 2025 or later, which again hurts them because they don't have infinite money. And Tesla will have more money than them pretty much starting by the end of this year. Like in terms of like revenue and all that. They're just really competitive with the top guys in terms of like net income, but they double revenue up to 100 billion or more, then they'll be passing Ford and GM on the top line, and because they have more margin, they'll have more net income. Something for the legacy auto is every GM Bolt and every Hyundai Kona ever made was recalled because LG Chem made some batteries that catch fire when they're sitting around. So legacy auto has huge problems. So I have to go to a forecast. So I think that the delay that each major announcement of mass amount of vehicles mean to kind of set the new floor for the coming quarter as people digest and say, wow, that happened. 360,000 cars, say, from Q1. We already have some data that China increased 2% from December to January, from 66,000 to 68,000 cars just out of the Shanghai factory. We got no information from Fremont, but they are still ramping Model S and then Model X, the plaid versions, the refreshed versions. And then it seems like they've broken through whatever capacity limits on the Model 3 and Y. And Tesla's sandbag number for Fremont is over 600,000 for the year, which would mean 150,000 per quarter. So, you know, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect probably 360,000. Might disappoint, might be 340, could be at 390. So then there's this range of revenues based on those numbers. So I think 21 billion up from 18 billion, and then $5 billion in net income. So the expected stock range would then be 1,000 to 1,600. When you go up 50% or double your net income, then, you know, that's going to translate into a better trading range for the stock from April 2nd to July 1st. Next quarter comes along, we really get far more ramp out of Germany, Austin, and continuing ramp out of China, then perhaps 460,000 cars. So all four factories expanding a little or a lot, mostly from China the first half of the year. Mostly from China first half of the year, maybe even China all the way through the year will get more expansion because of this doubling to 2 million cars from a new factory. So China could go from less than 500,000 cars produced last year to 1.2 million cars, 1.3 million cars this year. So adding 700,000 cars to the actual production and the run rate heading towards 1.5 million or whatever by the end of the year. Completely possible. Well, it'd be tough for Germany and Austin to get to 250,000 cars total production, 500,000 car run rate. Be very difficult. Maybe not impossible. We don't know yet. And then that means it really starts, those four factories really start firing, and, you know, Q3 and Q4, 600,000, 750,000 cars, maybe 950,000 cars in Q4. And again, we won't know until the volume numbers come out two days after the close, which is why the prizes on production will get bigger and bigger. And then 2023, 4 to 6 million cars, 6 to 10, 9 to 20. If, you know, this massive flood of LFP batteries comes through, Tesla continues to improve the range on them. More and more of the cars can use that. So it'll be, you know, the numbers will start looking, you know, pretty shocking and amazing. You know, $4,000, $6,000 share price 2023, 5 to 10,000 2024, maybe, you know, 15,000, 20,000 in 2025. That's with insane production and not that much from FSD, insane car production, and also a lot of energy production. So it'd just be a sudden whoosh, relatively speaking, in 4 years, where, and then Tesla's the biggest car maker, perhaps one of the biggest battery makers, biggest energy storage maker, and with topped up with software from FSD, et cetera. And then there's some detailed analysis discussing the battery costs, older numbers and stuff like that. And again, the bottom line, others also expecting $50 per kilowatt hour batteries. I think that goes even lower than that. And then the general efficiency, which Tesla has this 20 to 40% advantage, 30 to 100% actually. Some cars are really, really bad that they have on range weight analysis. And then lithium iron ore. Some bears have, oh, there's not enough lithium, or you know, there's sorting problem on lithium. So a Chinese car company is going to, battery company is going to spend $20 billion making 500 gigawatt hours of factories, and they're not going to lock up their lithium supply. You know, are they complete morons? You know, of course they are. Of course they have the lithium. You know, there's new mines, I think in Mongolia or other places. They're going all over the world and getting the lithium. The lithium and every other supply component, they're getting it. Okay, you don't green light $2 billion, you know, $10 billion factories or $23 billion battery factories without locking up your lithium supplies and every other component. Okay, so that is no worries. Great Wall, which also owns S-Volt, is talking about targeting 4 million cars in 2025. I'm not sure they have the brand to do that, and the models are in question. So, Tesla's the one who had actually proven, that kind of demand going beyond 1 million cars. So scaling for all the smaller makers, especially, but legacy auto and the Rivians and Lucids of the world, meaningless to the story of who's a major player in the 50 million car space in 2025. Right? If you're still trying to figure out how to make 20,000 cars like Lucid in next year, you're not making 2023. You're not making 1 million cars in 2025. Same for all the other guys. And then we'll go over this in more detail. So the fundamental thing is the explosion in demand has happened already. You can see it in the back orders. You can see it in the share for particular countries. And the LFP supply, CATL ramped a ton at the end of last year, month by month, growing, doubling from December over July. So the explosion LFP has happened, and then tens of billions of dollars, many new factories from 5-6 major players. And then the LFP battery patents expire like April. So any company that was held back by patents and stuff, they can start making more LFP. I'm not sure if South Korea or the European guys go to iron LFP because there could be a glut. So I'm not sure if they want to fight in the same space as the China guys. It's a strategic question, how much they do it. They probably would want to get some experience in it just in case. So we can discuss that in more detail as we go over all the ramifications, all the analysis about how this is happening. Well, thank you for your time, and meet you next time.